Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are jumping really headfirst into a deep analysis of leadership, trust, and I guess moral consistency.
Yeah, some heavy but really crucial topic.
Absolutely. We've gathered this really comprehensive stack of source material. It's almost like a blueprint, It's packed with these rigorous discussion questions and reflective exercises.
And our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're trying to extract the most challenging, the most transformative ideas from all this material.
Giving you a shortcut, really.
Exactly. A shortcut to ethical leadership mastery. This isn't just theory. It's a manual for self-assessment and for real practical change.
I find the starting point of this so compelling because it immediately challenges our assumptions. We're so used to measuring competence, right? But the core idea we're unpacking is, well, what if credibility, not competence, is the true currency of leadership?
That one shift in focus, it just changes everything.
It does.
I mean, if you're competent but people can't rely on you, your ability to influence just disappears. So before we can even talk about acting with integrity, we first have to, define it.
And what's the definition we're working with here?
It's powerful in its simplicity. Integrity is just the observed consistency between your internal values, your external words, and your daily actions. If those three don't align, you've got a gap.
A gap that your team will spot instantly.
Instantly.
And that leads right into the first big self-assessment question of the material, which is, how do you define integrity when no one is watching?
And then the second part.
Right. And does that definition actually align with how your team would define your integrity? That disparity between your self-perception and their reality. That's where most leadership failures begin.
And what's truly fascinating is that the erosion of trust, it rarely starts with some huge public scandal.
No, it's just small stuff.
It's the small stuff. It starts with what these sources call small inconsistencies. That could be, consistently starting meetings 5 minutes late.
Or promising to follow up on a minor issue and then just letting it drop.
Exactly. These small, tolerated lapses in reliability, they just quietly eat away at credibility. It's a death by 1,000 cuts.
So let's probe that a little. When that quiet erosion finally leads to a breach of trust, which collapses first in an organization, is it performance or is it morale?
That's such an insightful prompt. And while, a results-driven organization might try to keep performance metrics up,
You'll try to brute force it.
right. But the sources suggest it's almost always morale that falters first. If your team starts questioning your consistency, your judgment, they pull back their discretionary effort.
They stop taking risks.
They stop trusting the strategy, they start looking out for themselves, the performance drop, that follows. But the internal disconnect, that morale crisis, is the real leading indicator.
Okay, so let's make this actionable for everyone listening. To track those small inconsistencies, the material gives us this brilliant framework. They call it the trust ledger.
Or a trust balance sheet.
Yep. It just asks you to track your daily interactions and categorize them. Are they deposits or are they withdrawals?
And we have to recognize that the deposits are often really subtle. A deposit isn't some grand gesture.
Not a big raise.
No, it's micro-reliability.
Yeah.
It's closing the loop on a small task you delegated weeks ago, or giving timely, honest feedback, or visibly admitting when you're at fault. These are the small actions that communicate reliability.
Way more powerfully than any big motivational speech ever could.
For sure. And conversely, withdrawals are things like shifting priorities without any communication, or showing up late, or being unprepared for a meeting.
So the exercise for you is to just track 5 recent interactions and then categorize them. If you think about your leadership influence as a trust balance, what deposits and withdrawals are happening daily in your own ledger?
That sustained rhythm, positive or negative, that's what defines your influence. And that reflection, it guides us perfectly into the next area, the internal structures we need.
Exactly. So moving beyond just defining it, the sources challenge us to establish our internal structure, to define your non-negotiables.
This is where you define your moral compass. And the critical question here is, what 5 core values would you never, ever trade? No matter how great the reward or how intense the pressure might get.
Because if you don't clearly articulate those principles for yourself,
your organization will define them for you, usually right in the middle of a crisis.
And here's the ultimate accountability test on those values. Could the people you lead, without even asking you, could they accurately name your non-negotiables.
That's a tough question.
It is, because if your team can't articulate your core values, it is literally impossible for them to align their actions with your moral framework.
To help with that, the sources recommend a tool, creating ethical filters for decision-making. These aren't, long policy documents.
Now, they're short.
They're short, guiding questions that act as an immediate gut check. Things like, how would I feel if this decision was on tomorrow's front page? Or would I do this if absolutely no one was watching?
Those filters keep your non-negotiables top of mind when the rules suddenly feel ambiguous. Which brings us to accountability, the leadership amplifier.
Right.
And this section asks a really pointed question. Who in your life has permission to question your motives? And how often do they actually do it?
Establishing a formal accountability circle is the difference between a culture that's defensive and one that is truly developmental. It allows for critical feedback without it feeling like a threat.
And it forces us to confront this difficult leadership dilemma. What's harder, admitting a mistake publicly or just correcting it privately?
That's a great distinction, because your answer to that reveals whether your priority is protecting your ego and your public image or protecting the integrity of the mission itself.
So true accountability protects your long-term influence. It never threatens it.
But that has to be balanced with transparency, right? We need to analyze the dilemma. What is the threshold for transparency? When does openness strengthen your leadership, and when might it actually weaken it?
It's not about oversharing every detail.
No, it's about consistent communication of the purpose and the process, the why behind the decision.
Right. The warning here is stark. Selective transparency holding back key context can so easily be seen as manipulation rather than wisdom.
Exactly. If you justify tough decisions internally but you don't communicate that reasoning clearly, people just assume you have something to hide.
Even if you're just trying to simplify the message, you have to share the why.
The why, the what, and the how, it bridges that perception gap.
So let's transition now to the proving grounds, the high-stakes scenarios where integrity is truly tested. We're moving from internal structures to external pressure.
Yes, and this focuses on the cost of compromise. The sources stress that just one, quote, minor compromise.
Like relaxing quality standards just once to hit a quarterly target.
Exactly. That one thing can quietly shape the culture more profoundly than any grand strategic initiative. We rationalize it, say it's for the greater good, but the unintended consequences always follow.
Because that compromise just set a new standard for what's acceptable.
It did. But the sources don't just warn you, they provide a defense. They recommend developing a compromise risk matrix.
That's just what exactly.
You literally list your recurring pressure points, budget constraints, political influence, unrealistic targets, and you evaluate the risk level for each one.
And then comes the proactive step. Writing a pre-commitment statement for those high-risk scenarios. This is vital.
It is. For example, if you know that budget season pressures you to cut corners on safety training, your statement might be, when pressured by the budget, I will prioritize staff safety over short-term cost savings.
It removes the decision from the heat of the moment.
Precisely. That pre-commitment becomes your anchor when you inevitably move into those high-pressure situations. When adversity strikes, what does that moment reveal about your real priorities?
Pressure doesn't build character. It reveals the character that was already there.
But we don't have to see pressure as this pessimistic thing. The optimistic view is that it can become a proving ground, not a breaking point. And to manage this, the material details the pressure playbook.
It's basically a crisis checklist, a handful of principles to guide you when adrenaline is high and rational thought is a little low.
And the core principles suggested are truth first, people second, and outcomes last.
That checklist helps you model calm conviction instead of reactive control. It shows consistency when the stakes are at their highest.
And that takes us from personal discipline to systemic integration, shifting the focus from your own daily practice to cultivating an integrity-driven culture across the whole organization.
Culture alignment audit.
Exactly.
This is where we look at the messy reality. What hidden messages in your systems or your reward structures might be contradicting your stated values?
Right. Think about the unspoken rules versus the official employee manual.
Yeah, if your stated value is collaboration, but only the individual heroes who hoard information get promoted,
then your systems are undermining your integrity message. Your words are meaningless. The audit requires asking your team directly. How would you describe the unspoken rules of integrity here?
If we can audit the culture, then we have to try to measure the unmeasurable. The sources pose this challenging question. If integrity were a key performance indicator, a KPI, what evidence would prove your leadership passes the test?
And we're not talking about general feedback scores here. We're talking about creating personal, measurable integrity KPIs.
These aren't just fluffy aspirations.
No, they're beta trails. Examples might be your feedback honesty rate. So, how often you deliver the difficult truth versus avoiding it, or your follow-through ratio, the percentage of commitments you actually meet, no matter how small.
These are measurable indicators of reliability that directly influence your credibility.
Which leads to the ultimate accountability test in the material. What might happen if you published your integrity scorecard publicly? Yeah. Would that radical transparency inspire confidence? Or would it expose gaps that are currently being shielded?
That's a big question. And finally, this commitment requires lifelong action. The material outlines the need to break these long-term growth goals into monthly, weekly, and even daily action steps.
It's all captured in what they call a 12-month integrity growth plan. Integrity can't be a crisis response. It has to be a leadership rhythm. You have to actively schedule these check-ins.
So we've covered a tremendous amount of ground here, from the micro-reliability on the trust ledger all the way to the compromise risk matrix. And I think the takeaway is clear. Integrity is less about grand pronouncements and far more about the small, consistent alignment of your actions with your values.
The discussion just consistently returns to the ultimate legacy question. When your leadership journey is over, will people remember your achievements, your results, or will they remember your integrity?
Trust is the legacy worth building.
And worth inheriting.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to carry forward, building on this idea of future-proofing integrity. Considering global trends like the rise of AI ethics, demands for greater transparency, or increased stakeholder activism, how will the definition and practice of integrity need to evolve in the next decade?
What does your Integrity 2030 vision look like today? And what proactive steps are you taking to prepare for that future moral landscape?
A lot to think about. Thank you for joining us for this crucial discussion.
We hope these insights accelerate your journey to leadership mastery.
See you in the next deep dive.